When we think of the arsenal that won World War II, we think of the icons, the legends, the weapons that have been immortalized in films and video games. But a war is not won by icons alone. It is won by a vast and complex system of arms. And in that system, some of the most crucial, most effective, and most feared weapons have been almost completely forgotten. These are the unsung heroes, the ugly ducklings, the secret weapons, and the humble workhorses that solved problems no one else could. They were not always glamorous, but they were brutally effective. They were the weapons that surprised the enemy, that plugged a fatal gap in the Allied arsenal, and that often made the difference between catastrophic failure and victory. Today, we are counting down the top 5 forgotten American weapons that were surprisingly deadly. To rank these unsung heroes, we're looking beyond fame and focusing on their unique, often overlooked contributions to victory. Our criteria are first, forgotten status. How overlooked is this weapon in popular history compared to the legends? Second, surprising deadliness. How unexpectedly effective was this weapon in its specific, often niche role? And third, strategic impact. How did this weapon provide a unique wall-altering capability that the enemy struggled to counter? Before we begin, we must honor the Hedgehog anti-submarine mortar. Unlike depth charges, which were dropped behind a ship and blinded its sonar with the explosion, the Hedgehog fired a pattern of 24 small contact-fest bombs ahead of the ship. They only exploded on impact, meaning a single explosion was almost always a confirmed kill. It was a brutally effective U-boat killer. And the T-1E3 mine roller, nicknamed the Aunt Jemima. This massive 2-3-ton device used 10 feet solid steel discs to detonate mines safely in front of a Sherman tank. It was a crude but effective tool that helped breach the formidable German Siegfried line. Kicking off our list is a weapon of pure, primal terror, the M2 flamethrower. In the popular imagination, the flamethrower is a niche, almost cinematic weapon. But, in the brutal, close-quarters fighting of the Pacific War, it was an indispensable and shockingly effective tool for solving a specific tactical nightmare. The Japanese doctrine of fighting to the last man from a network of fortified caves and bunkers presented a horrifying challenge. The M2 could project a stream of burning jellied gasoline napalm over 40 yards, engulfing a bunker's firing slit and consuming all the oxygen inside. Its psychological impact was immense. Japanese soldiers who would fight to the death against bullets would often break and run at the mere sight of the flamethrower teams. While the backpack M2 was deadly, its operator was incredibly vulnerable. This led to the development of the Sherman Zippo M4A3R3, which mounted a massive flamethrower on a tank, allowing for the same terrifying effect, but with the protection of armored steel. It was a horrific but brutally effective weapon system. At number 4 is a vehicle that never fired a shot in anger, but whose surprising deadliness was indirect and profound. The M4 high-speed tractor. American artillery was a cornerstone of its battlefield dominance. But a big gun is useless if it can't get to the battle. While the Germans still relied heavily on horses, the US Army was fully mechanized. The M4 tractor, built on the reliable chassis of a Steyr light tank, was the beast of burden that gave American artillery its legs. It could haul the massive, long tom cannon through mud, snow, and sand that would stop any truck. This mobility enabled a tactic of constant displacement, or shoot and scoot, where gun batteries could fire a devastating barrage and then immediately move before the Germans could locate them and return fire. The M4's deadliness was in making the most powerful weapons on the field, both omnipresent and unkillable, a nightmare for German commanders trying to defend a position. When we think of American tank killers, we think of the Sherman. But by late 1944, A new and far more lethal hunter had arrived on the battlefield. A hero that history often forgets. The M36 Jackson tank destroyer. By this point in the war, the standard 75mm and 76mm guns on Allied tanks were struggling against the thick frontal armor of German Panthers and Tigers. The M36 was a glass cannon, a lightly armored vehicle built on a Sherman chassis. But it carried a weapon the Germans were not prepared for. The high-velocity 90mm M3 gun. German intelligence had no idea the Americans had fielded a gun this powerful in large numbers. During Hitler's last great gamble, the Battle of the Bulge, Panther, and even the mighty King Tiger crews, who had felt invincible, were suddenly and shockingly being destroyed from ranges they thought were safe. With specialized, high-velocity, armor-piercing HVAP ammunition, the M36 could punch through over 12 in of armor, making it one of the few Allied weapons that could reliably kill a Panther from the front. The M36's surprising deadliness was its ability to completely nullify the German armor advantage at a critical moment in the war. The Higgins boat is rightly famous for getting men to the beach. But what if the beach itself was the obstacle? This was the deadly problem in the Central Pacific, and the forgotten weapon that solved it is our number 2, the Landing Vehicle Tracked, or LVT. Initially designed as a civilian rescue vehicle for the Florida swamps, the LVT, or Alligator, was a true amphibian. Its moment of glory came at the bloody Battle of Tarawa in 1943. A catastrophic miscalculation of the tides meant the Higgins boats were getting stuck on a coral reef hundreds of yards from shore, forcing the Marines to wade into a meat grinder. The LVTs, which were essentially unarmored, with crews having to bolt on scrap boilerplate steel in the field, were the only vehicles that could crawl over the reef, saving the entire invasion from catastrophic failure. This surprising success from a vehicle never intended for combat led to the development of uppermod and upjed versions like the LVT-A4, which were essentially light tanks that could swim ashore. They became the indispensable assault vehicles of the Pacific War. The swimming tanks that made the brutal reef-bound island-hopping campaign possible. And at number 1 is the ultimate forgotten weapon. A piece of technology so secret its existence was guarded as closely as the atomic bomb, and so revolutionary it changed the nature of warfare. The variable time or proximity fuse. Before the VT fuse, hitting a fast-moving aircraft with an artillery shell was a matter of complex calculation and pure luck. The proximity fuse was a tiny, ruggedized radio transceiver that fit into the nose of an artillery shell. The engineering challenge was immense. Shells went from downing 24% of targets to 79% in a matter of weeks. And when finally cleared for ground use during the Battle of the Bulge, it was a weapon of pure terror, with shells exploding in the air above the foxholes of German soldiers, unleashing a storm of steel from which there was no cover. It was a secret, invisible, and shockingly deadly weapon that fundamentally changed the nature of warfare. The flamethrower, the tractor, the Jackson, the LVT, and the proximity fuse. They are the forgotten arsenal. They prove that victory in war is not just about the iconic weapons, but about the clever solutions, the humble workhorses, and the secret technologies that solve impossible problems. They are the surprising and deadly reasons the Allies won the war. Which of these forgotten weapons do you think was the most surprisingly effective? Did we get the ranking right? Let us know in the comments below. And for more deep dives into military history, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell.